July 1940, the Roots Group factory, Humber Road, Coventry. A vehicle rolls off the assembly line and into the grey English daylight. It sits on civilian car wheels. Its engine is the same 6-cylinder unit, fitted to a luxury saloon that, 12 months earlier, was ferrying stockbrokers to the theatre. Flat steel plates have been riveted and bolted onto its flanks at crude angles, forming a box barely taller than a man. There is no turret. There is no roof. The armour, where it exists at all, is 10mm thick. A determined rifleman could punch through it at close range. It looked desperate. It looked improvised. It looked like something a factory had thrown together because there was nothing else left to give. That is exactly what it was. And yet this bolted-together box of civilian steel would go on to become the standard reconnaissance vehicle of the British Army, serve in every major theatre from North Africa to Northwest Europe, equip the newly formed Reconnaissance Corps from front to rear, carry the first Allied vehicle across the Tunisian border, and fight its way from the beaches of Sicily to the banks of the Rhine. Its designation was the Humber Light Reconnaissance Car, known to the men who built it as the Ironside. It was the armoured car Britain never planned to build, built because Britain had nothing else. To understand why the Ironside existed, you need to understand the catastrophe Britain faced in the summer of 1940. Between May 26th and June 4th of that year, the Royal Navy and a flotilla of civilian vessels evacuated roughly 338,000 troops from the beaches and harbour of Dunkirk. They saved the men. They saved almost nothing else. Left behind on the roads and fields of northern France were approximately 700 tanks, 880 field guns, 500 anti-aircraft guns, 850 anti-tank guns, 11,000 machine guns, and 45,000 motor vehicles. Enough equipment to outfit 8 to 10 full divisions had been abandoned in a matter of days. Armoured regiments returned to England with nothing but rifles and Bren guns. General Sir Edmund Ironside, appointed Commander-in-Chief of Home Forces on May 27th, faced the task of defending the entire southern coastline of England against Operation Sea Lion, Hitler's planned cross-channel invasion, with an army that was functionally disarmed. He had 172-pounder anti-tank guns for the whole of southern England, 170, supplemented by 100 obsolete First World War Hotchkiss 6-pounders that had been pulled out of storage. The Ministry of Supply, headquartered at Shelmex House on the Strand in London, issued an emergency specification to every major British motor manufacturer. The requirement was blunt: produce a light reconnaissance car using commercially available components. No time for bespoke military chassis. No time for years of testing. Use what you have. Build it now. The same specification produced 4 vehicles. The Daimler Dingo, which would become the finest British scout car of the war with 6,626 eventually built. The Morris Light Reconnaissance Car, with over 2,200 produced. The standard Beaverette, a crude propaganda vehicle armoured partly with oak planking. And the Humber Light Reconnaissance Car, built by the Roots Group from the chassis of a luxury saloon called the Super Snipe. The Roots brothers, Sir William and Sir Reginald, controlled an empire of British motor manufacturing from their Coventry base. Humber, Hillman, Singer, Sunbeam, Carrier, Commer, all answered to Roots. Sir William sat on the Supply Council of the Ministry of Supply and personally led the reconstruction of Coventry after the devastating Luftwaffe bombing raid of November 14, 1940. Between them, the Roots factories would eventually produce 60% of all British armoured cars and 30% of all scout cars built during the war. The conversion from luxury car to armoured vehicle was conceptually crude but practically effective. Strip the civilian bodywork from the Humber Super Snipe chassis. Retain its 4,086 cubic centimetre inline 6-cylinder side valve petrol engine, originally designed with input from American engineer Delmar Roos, formerly of Studebaker. Bolt flat steel armour plates onto the frame at sloped angles. Fit War Department pattern wheels with Dunlop run flat tyres. Mount a Boys .55 caliber anti-tank rifle and a Bren .303 light machine gun inside the open-topped hull. Add a number 19 wireless set. Crew it with 3 men, a driver, a commander, and a gunner, and send it south to watch the beaches. The engine produced approximately 87 horsepower in military tune, roughly half what a proper armoured car needed. Maximum armour was 10mm on the front and 7 to 9mm on the sides. There was no roof. There was no floor protection. The vehicle weighed 2.8 tons, which meant it could use any road and most country lanes in England, but it also meant that any weapon heavier than a rifle could kill everyone inside it. Top speed was around 45 miles per hour, not fast enough to outrun anything with intent to kill, but fast enough to get from one observation point to the next before the enemy arrived. That was the theory. And in the summer of 1940, theory was all Britain had. Approximately 200 Mark I Ironsides were completed between July and late 1940. They were stationed across southern England, positioned to spot and report German parachute landings and glider assaults. Named after General Ironside himself, they were never intended to fight. They were intended to see the enemy and radio his position before they died. That was the honest calculation. One distinctive sub-variant emerged from this desperate period. In the summer of 1940, Roots converted several Mark I chassis into armoured saloons for the royal family and senior cabinet ministers, including Winston Churchill. Coach builders Thrupp and Maberly fitted Pullman standard interiors with leather upholstery and Perspex privacy screens. 8 vehicles were completed. A troop of Guy armoured cars escorted them from July 1940 to March 1941. The King and Queen of England were, for a time, driven through London in a modified version of the same chassis that was expected to stop German paratroopers on the South Downs. Then the invasion never came, and the Ironside had to become something more. The Mark II, introduced in 1941, added an enclosed armoured roof and a small one-man turret mounting the Bren gun on counterbalanced arms. The Mark III, arriving in late 1941, was the version that transformed the vehicle. It introduced four-wheel drive by stretching the chassis to accommodate a transfer box behind the gearbox. An armoured bulge nicknamed the Bump was added beneath the hull to clear the driver's feet. Armour increased to 12 mm on the front, 8 on the sides, and 7 on the roof and rear. Weight rose to 3.17 tons. A 4-inch smoke discharger was fitted forward. The Mark III was the variant that went to war. Now, before we get into where this vehicle actually fought and what it achieved in combat, if you are enjoying this deep dive into British wartime engineering, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. The Humber Light Reconnaissance Car's combat debut came during Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of French North Africa, in November 1942. The 56th Reconnaissance Regiment, originally of the 56th London Division, and later transferred to the 78th Battle Axe Division, landed near Algiers equipped with Humber LRCs. What happened next entered regimental legend. According to unit records, the first Allied vehicle to cross into Tunisia was a Humber LRC of 15-troop C Squadron, commanded by Lieutenant Graham Watley, a stopgap home defence car built from a luxury saloon chassis designed to watch English beaches had just led the Allied advance into a new country. The irony was not lost on anyone. From Tunisia, the vehicle spread across every major theatre. The 5th Reconnaissance Regiment led the 1st 8th Army landing in Italy at Reggio on September 3, 1943. They lost 13 LRCs during the subsequent fighting in Sicily, where narrow mountain roads, stone walls, and concealed anti-tank guns turned every bend into an ambush. The 44th Reconnaissance Regiment landed at Salerno. The 1st Reconnaissance Regiment fought at Anzio, where the confined beachhead offered no room for the fast, wide flanking movements that reconnaissance doctrine demanded. Crews adapted, using their vehicles as mobile observation posts and infantry fire support platforms in terrain that should have made them useless. In Normandy, at least 7 reconnaissance regiments operated the Humber LRC from D-Day onwards. The 3rd, 15th, 43rd, 49th, 53rd, 59th, and 61st Reconnaissance Regiments all fielded the type. By this stage of the war, the Humber was being progressively supplemented by the heavier Humber armoured car and the Daimler armoured car, but the LRC remained the workhorse of the reconnaissance troop, the vehicle that went first, looked furthest, and reported back. In the bocage country of Normandy, where every hedgerow concealed a machine gun nest, and every crossroad was a potential killing ground, reconnaissance crews operated in pairs, one vehicle advancing while the other covered from a hull-down position. The LRC's narrow width, just 1.88 metres, allowed it to squeeze down farm tracks that would have stopped wider armoured cars entirely. Crews consistently praised 2 things: reliability. The Super Snipe engine, designed for comfortable motoring on English roads, proved remarkably durable across desert heat, Italian mud, and the frozen winter of 1944 to 45 in the Ardennes, and survivability when hitting mines. The flat hull bottom, a design weakness in terms of blast deflection, paradoxically distributed mine damage in a way that often allowed crews to survive. Multiple accounts describe LRCs detonating telemines, and the crew walking away, shaken but alive. The criticisms were equally persistent. 10 to 12 millimeters of armour was not enough. Crews knew it. Officers knew it. A heavy machine gun could penetrate the hull at battlefield ranges. The vehicle's silhouette was too tall, making it conspicuous on open ground. Emergency egress was difficult. The Bren gun mounting in the turret was too flimsy for accurate fire on the move, and the smoke discharger fired only forward, which was precisely useless when attempting to break contact and reverse away from enemy fire. Beyond British formations, the Humber LRC served with the 1st Czechoslovak Independent Armoured Brigade Group, which received 13 vehicles on September 1, 1942, and deployed them through France into the liberation of Prague. At least one Humber LRC participated in the Czech victory parade through Prague on May 31, 1945. The 1st Polish Armoured Division operated the type in Normandy and the Netherlands. The RAF Regiment, formed on February 1, 1942, received approximately 600 LRCs for airfield defence, patrolling, and ground liaison with fighter-bomber squadrons across North Africa, Italy and the Low Countries. Units such as No. 2806 Armoured Car Squadron operated Mark III as near Eindhoven in 1944 and 45. The Canadian Army took the concept further. General Motors Canada built approximately 1,700 vehicles called the Otter Light Reconnaissance Car, directly based on the Humber Mark III, but mounted on a Chevrolet C-15 truck chassis. The Otter served with Canadian reconnaissance units from Italy to the Scheldt. On paper, the Daimler Dingo was everything the Humber was not. 30mm of frontal armour, nearly 3 times the Humber's protection. A fluid flywheel and pre-selector gearbox that made it mechanically advanced beyond anything else in its class. Independent suspension. A top speed of 55 miles per hour. The Dingo was arguably the best scout car of the entire war, but it carried no fixed armament. The Humber mounted both a boy's anti-tank rifle and a Bren gun, giving it the ability to engage light vehicles and infantry that the Dingo simply could not match. The standard Beaverette, the vehicle most commonly associated with the invasion scare, was barely a military vehicle at all. Its Mark I used 11mm of steel backed by 76mm of oak planking. Its engine produced 46 horsepower. The Mark III variant managed just 24 miles per hour. No Beaverette ever served overseas. It was visible reassurance for a frightened public, not a combat vehicle. The Humber Ironside was the real answer. The Morris Light Reconnaissance Car came closest to matching the Humber in capability, slightly heavier at 3.7 tons, with 14mm of frontal armour and an unusual 3-abreast seating layout. It cost around £900 per unit, making it cheaper. But the Humber was faster, more widely produced, and ultimately more trusted by the Reconnaissance Corps that depended on it. What replaced the Humber was its own bloodline. The heavier Humber Armoured Car, 5400 built on the Carrier KT-4 artillery tractor chassis, carried 15mm and 7.92mm Bisa machine guns in a proper turret. The Daimler Armoured Car mounted a 40mm 2-pounder gun. Both were genuine fighting vehicles. By 1944, the LRC was being pushed to secondary roles, but it remained in service through VE Day and beyond, serving in Palestine, India and the Far East, before the Reconnaissance Corps was disbanded in August 1946. Remarkably few survive. Confirmed examples exist at the Royal Air Force Museum in London, the National War and Resistance Museum at Overloon in the Netherlands, the Royal Museum of the Armed Forces in Brussels, and as a gate guardian at the Military College in Trimulgeri, India. A handful of private restorations and replicas exist in the United Kingdom and the Czech Republic. From roughly 3,600 vehicles ordered, fewer than a dozen are known to survive in any form. July 1940, the Roots Group factory, Humber Road, Coventry. A vehicle rolls off the line on civilian wheels powered by a luxury car engine, wrapped in steel plates thin enough to be pierced by a rifle at close range. No turret, no roof, no floor armour, 10mm between the crew and everything the Wehrmacht could throw at them. It was underpowered. It was under-armoured. It was too tall. Its smoke discharger pointed the wrong way. Its turret mounting shook itself loose on rough ground. It was a civilian car pretending to be a weapon of war, and every man who crewed one knew it, and yet it worked. It worked on the beaches of southern England, where it watched for an invasion that never came. It worked in the mountains of Tunisia, where it led the Allied advance across the border. It worked in the dust of Sicily and the mud of Italy, and the hedgerows of Normandy and the frozen roads of the Ardennes. It worked during Operation Plunder, crossing the Rhine under fire in March 1945. It worked in the final advance into Germany, where reconnaissance troops in Humber LRCs were among the first to make contact with advancing Soviet forces. It worked because it could be built fast, repaired with civilian parts, driven by men who had learned on family motorcars, and replaced when it was destroyed. Over 3,600 were ordered. They served with the British Army, the RAF Regiment, the Polish, the Czechs, the Canadians, and the Australians. They fought on 4 continents. The Roots Group built them alongside 5,400 Humber armoured cars and 4,100 Humber Scout cars, making one civilian motor manufacturer responsible for more British armoured vehicles than any other company in the war. The Humber Ironside was not elegant, it was not powerful, it was not designed to last, it was designed to exist right now, when nothing else did. That is not desperation,